All right, thank everyone for coming. Just going to introduce Mike Melen really quick. Mike Melen is the founder of SmartSites, a 7-time Inc. 5000 fastest growing marketing agency. SmartSites is based in the United States, has over 350 full-time team members. SmartSites is a premier Google partner, select Microsoft partner, Meta business partner, and Amazon ads partner. Melen is an acclaimed thought leader and entrepreneur. A graduate of Cornell University, he sold his first internet company at 19 years old. He has spoken at the Small Business Expo, Digimarcon, TES Affiliate Summit Portugal 2023, Name Summit, and Google. His work in digital marketing has earned him recognition from leading publications including Forbes Inc. magazine and Adweek. Please welcome Mike Melen.
Hello, everyone. So I'm very happy to be here. And this is really an awesome track. I've been to a few presentations, so I'm really excited to give my thoughts and also, keep attending this conference. So very nice to meet the few I've met already, people here, and I hope to meet more of you in the coming day. So what I'm going to talk about is ChatGPT and how you could use it for SEO. So I started my company. I'm the co-founder a little over 10 years ago. And really, with SEO, with AI coming out like the last couple of years, it really gave us such a big jump for optimization and everything. And I absolutely love it. I'm obsessed with this thing. I use it every single day. My computer setup in my work office is I have 4 monitors, and one of the monitors, at least half of it, always has ChatGPT on it. So it's really anytime I could use it, I could use it. I use it with my kids. So I'm really just I don't know, borderline obsessed with it a little bit. But today I'm going to give you maybe some general tips on it, some general thoughts, but then I'll dive into applications of SEO. It'll be a very practical speech. There'll be, actual use cases. It's not very theoretical. It'll be things you could actually use with it. A little bit about us, but you've already gotten the intro. I started the company a little over 10 years ago. Now in total, there's over 350 employees, around 100 in the US, around 5 to 10 are here in this room with me. It's been really good. We've been one of the fastest growing companies for the past 7 years, consecutive years. We have over 1,000 5-star reviews. And really, SEO and pay-per-click are the cornerstone of what we do. I started on the SEO side when I started the company around 12 years ago. But even when I was doing SEO, quite frankly, I was promoting my SEO with pay-per-click, and really SEO and pay-per-click are still the cornerstone, the bread and butter of what we do. All right, so a little bit about ChatGPT. So, it really it came out a while ago, but then it reached this tipping point, and the time to 100 million users, what you see right here, is faster than even social media brands, right? And this is like a social media play with your friends. Right, this is actually a creation tool, and just the rate that ChatGPT was able to scale is really phenomenal. And really, I think there's one thing that beat it since though. It was Threads that Facebook came out, which is like the Twitter competitor, but then a few weeks later, everyone stopped using it. So not much of a success story there. As I mentioned, so even though really it's been a tipping point really recently, it came out a while ago. It came out in 2016. That's when OpenAI was founded. And really Google is the pioneer with AI. Really, Google is way behind in this space now, but Google was at the forefront of AI from a while ago. Google published, it was in 2017, Attention is All You Need. And really it was the cornerstone of what AI is, which basically says, hey, AI is not that complex. It's actually not a lot of lines of code, and it's all about data and processing. And really, it was Google that pioneered it in 2017, and it was an open source document that later, all these other companies that are AI based, later referenced. And it was 2022, ChatGPT came out, and then ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4 now. And really, just last week, they've announced so many really cool, exciting things. So, really, this thing is going up exponentially. And this, just to show the rate of progress, they took different test scores with ChatGPT, and first, the first iteration was in blue, right? And then they come out with another iteration, and then all of a sudden the green is all the better test scores it now takes, right? So, from model to model, this thing is getting really, really smart. Okay, some general tips before we get into the specific SEO things. Okay, so this is a funny thing that I don't know if I see too much, but I've seen it around when ChatGPT just came out. It's a little bit blurry, but this is a job ad of a person looking for a prompt engineer, right? So they basically said, hey, we're going to have one person in our organization and he's going to be the ChatGPT person, right? And that's not the right way to look at it, right? And really everyone in your organization should be using it. You know, it's very similar to using Google, right? It's kind of like saying like, okay, here's our organization and we're going to hire this guy's the Googler. So if you need anything from Google, no matter what it is, you're going to ask this one person. That's obviously not the optimal way to do it. This is something that every single person should use. Just a show of hands, how many people in this room have used ChatGPT at least once, played with it? I assume everyone? Cool, perfect. How many people use it, say, at least once a week? You know, have you used it this week? Still mostly everyone, nice. How many people here have paid for the ChatGPT 4, the $20 per month? Oh, less than half. Nice. Worth it, by the way. And I'll show some differences between the paid model and the non-paid, especially the things that came out within the last week or so. It made that paid version actually much more powerful. But I'll get into that. But it just goes to show you this is something that and it's funny, especially a little early on in an organization. I'll show this tool to people and say, listen, like, to edit this little even like formula or something, you actually don't need to go to developer anymore. You just ask ChatGPT and it spits it out and it just does it for you. And then like I still see them like task it out in our project management system. Like, hey, can you go to ChatGPT and ask them to fix this formula? I'm like, no, that's not the point. You just go yourself. You don't need like another middle person to go there to come back to you, right? So really and that's really the extraordinary part of it, right? It really empowers everyone. It lets everyone be, I don't want to say like I even put like legal documents through it, right? It's not the same thing as getting like a lawyer or something, right? But still, it's like so many times I'm given like, hey Mike, is this is this NDA good to sign? It's like 20 pages. It's like, all right, either I waste my time on it, I pay a lawyer lots of money to waste their time on it, or I actually pass it through ChatGPT. So it really empowers everyone, no matter what you are, to say, hey, use ChatGPT as a tool, to give you more power. All right, cool. So a lot of people, the way they use it, and ChatGPT itself has actually adjusted this also very recently in the coming weeks. A lot of people still use it as a one-way conversation, right? So they go there and they ask, hey, I need this done, right? And then ChatGPT, with what you gave it, does its best, right? But if you think about like an employee, right? You go to employee and you go like, hey, can you write this press release? It's like, okay, what's the press release about? Oh, we have this event. It's coming up. Here's the date. Write a press release. Right. Again, the employee would go, all right, but you got to give me some more. What questions? They'll say, okay, when is this event? Where is it happening? Why should people attend? Is there other material I could use to actually write this press release? Right. And ChatGPT doesn't necessarily do that, right? Unless you ask it to. So again, you go to ChatGPT, you ask it for a press release, and then you're surprised. You're like, listen, it made all this shit up, right? Like, it gave me this press release. It doesn't make sense. I'm spending more time rewriting this press release than I originally would have taken me to write it from scratch. And that's because you just gave it a little bit of info and, it just did the best it can with what it gave you. But you could go ChatGPT and you say, listen, I need to write, again, say a press release. Here's some information. What else do you need from me? And I'll actually come back to you and say, hey, can you give me this, and this, right? So whatever you need, hey, I'm thinking of writing this script. What do you think is best to write it on? Should I write it as this script or that script? Right. So again, if you come into it just like with an exact instruction, yeah, it's going to do what you're told. But it's like that saying goes, good employees do what they're told, but great employees tell you what to do. Right. So you could use ChatGPT for that like second level to say, hey, listen, here's my problem. Tell me how to solve it. What do you need me to give you for you to better help me with it? Cool. This is also relatively new. So one thing with ChatGPT, one thing that kind of, really annoyed me with it is it didn't keep like a good history, as in, it had just like this, like, chronological history of all your chats. But I use it for so many things, right? I use it for emails. I use it for formulas. I use it for scripts. I also use it with my kids, right? So all of a sudden, like, this history is like, poem for my kid, and then this like HR problem. And then this, it's like, all right, how the heck do I organize it? And later I need to go back to like the script and I'm like, where did it find, where was I? Where was that chat? And I'm like, heck, I'll just start a new one. But of course, if you start a new one, all the things you told it gets lost, right? So what you could do is you could save it, and actually, if you go into, I have the screenshots here, but if you press the three icons, you could actually get a link to your to that to that conversation, and then you could do whatever you want to organize it. I like Google Sheets. All my stuff is in Google Sheets. So all of a sudden, you can have a Google Sheet, and then and then Google Sheet, you say, okay, these are my chats for this. This is my chats, for my content. This is my chats per client, maybe, right? Maybe you have 5 chats per client. This is my writing chat for the client. Here's where all my scripts go, and you could actually take it out, and you could also share it, by the way. So you could take that script, you could take that link rather, and then someone else could open it on their computer, and it just starts that chat, right where you left off, and it has all the information you have for it. Again, later I'll talk a little bit about, very new is GBTs that kind of take this to the next level, but still, when it comes to conversations and you want to save that conversation, you already invested so much to it, all the revisions, all the, hey, actually like it this way, write it that way, here's some more topics, right? You're giving it all that information. Don't restart every time. Go back to that conversation. And again, if it gets a little bit overwhelming, just copy the link and have a spreadsheet or whatever to organize it. Okay, cool. One thing that ChatGPT is very bad at, and a lot of AI is not just ChatGPT, is, and they call it, I like the term hallucinating, right? Where it gives you facts that are absolutely wrong. And there's some hilarious examples of it. And one I had was, we do some SEO for automotive, and I was playing around with this with automotive content. I was like, hey, can it write about car models? And one time I messed up what I gave it. Forget exactly what it was, but something like, can you write about a Mercedes-Benz Civic? I messed up 2, the make and the model, right? And it's obviously this car doesn't exist, right? But it gave me this, it's very confident about what a Mercedes Civic would have. It gave me the horsepower of it, it gave me all the cool features of it, and obviously it's wrong. And I'm wait, whoops, that's my bad. I gave it the wrong information. But even when you give it the right information, there's one time, I don't think there was a screenshot of it. No, there was at one point it said you put who founded SmartSites, and it's me and my brothers, but it said Mike, Alex, and Yana Melen, and I'm okay, there's this third sister I don't know about, right? I'm I don't have a third sister. My parents, hey, does ChatGPT know something that I don't, right? So I think the main, especially when it comes to content, especially when it comes to content, yeah, maybe. The main thing, the main pothole with ChatGPT right now is getting facts wrong. And I don't know if it maybe it's too blurry for you guys, but it actually tested things with ChatGPT and other AIs too. And I think there's an MIT study, and they recorded how many times it got it wrong, and also how many times it avoided the question. Sorry, I don't know. But more than avoiding the question, saying sorry, I don't know, it just gave you the wrong answer. And the more niche you get, the more there was wrong answers. So if you ask U.S. presidents, it was pretty good at it. But if it asks Moroccan political history, it just made it up, right? So the more niche you go, and again, you don't know if it's wrong or not. So really, you need to fact check. It's getting better, but still, I think the number one problem with ChatGPT, especially scaling it, relying on it, saying, listen, it just hands off AI. No, you actually have to read it. I trust it less than I would trust a human, giving me some facts. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk specifically about using it for content creation. Okay. So why we're even talking about this, right? So it used to be a stance from Google that you cannot use AI, right? You cannot automatically generate content, right? And Google had a very strong stance on it, and it looked like it would never change, right? So all of these AI tools before, like Jasper and all of these, really they were playing in this gray head area where, listen, Google doesn't like this. It says no to this, but maybe Google won't know, right? And that's literally the playing field before that you had, right? And again, you ask any SEO before this, I don't know about any SEO, but you would ask me, I would say, I don't see Google ever changing their stance on it, right? And then they did, right? They totally went 360 on it, and they said, actually, our new stance, they framed it not as a new stance. They're oh, we're always looking for useful and helpful content, but now it's no matter how it's generated. I'm well, it's very different than what you said before. But yeah, so right now, Google, out front saying, listen, you could use AI to generate content. There are a few asterisks you could say, though, right? Because they say, hey, the content needs to be original. So it's kind of a debate, okay, well, AI is not really original. It's just paraphrasing what it knows, right? Just like a large language model. It's not actually coming out with new concepts, at least not yet, right? There's no like, right? Soon enough, right? We'll hear the news of like AI develop this new like physics concept or this mathematical theorem. It hasn't happened yet, right? These tools are not actually creating new things, right? They're just using what we, all the information has, all the data it has, and kind of like spits it back out to you, and sometimes frames it a little bit differently, right? So, but with all the case studies you find online, AI, or at least AI supported content, I'll get to that a little bit, ranks just as well as you never touching it. And I think the main reason why they did this is, and they're seeing a little bit into the future, is you can't really distinguish. Maybe now you can. In a couple of years, you can, between, hey, was ChatGPT used to create this content, or at least the first draft, or at least parts of it, right? And it's like, listen, if you can't tell, then you might as you can't really have a policy on it. You have to allow it, and then put more focus on, is it actually useful? Is it original? No matter how it was initially created. And just for a little bit more context, and this is from my brain in SEO actually a couple of days ago, and this is one thing I was scared of with this whole AI thing coming out. I was like, listen, like if they're fine with this AI content and they would have just said it, all of a sudden it's going to kill Google. You're going to go to Google and there's going to be these like fake websites with millions and millions of pages, right? And it's right. If they don't care who wrote it, then why would you even have writers? And, right. It's like manually writing something is a big bottleneck. Right. If all of a sudden you could click a button and have 10 articles, 100 articles, 1,000 articles, it's like, this is going to really screw up Google, almost to a way that like Google was before, where it's like the things that ranked were really like black hat stuff with lots of keyword stuffing and like lots of this like fake spammy content. I was like, this might actually bring Google back to those days, but it didn't, right? So, and Google got a little clever with it. So again, there's a little bit of asterisks with like, how much is the right way to use ChatGPT for content. And they said, listen, automation used primarily for search ranking purposes is spam, right? That said, we focus on quality content now, not how it's produced. So again, there's a little bit of like on the fence with that stance, but there is a right way to use it. And I have a little bit about that. Okay. One thing with ChatGPT, and it kind of goes to what I was saying before, don't just ask it to say, like, write a blog post. And again, like maybe I'm saying this like a lot because this is how I see a lot of people use this, or a lot of people say, hey, Mike, like, no, I don't think like I need like, your agency to help me with this, because I just use ChatGPT for it. And yeah, I had to write me like 100 blogs. And like, I look at them like, dude, like no one's going to read this. Like, it's not about, it has no strategy, has no planning. Like, what are these things even about? Right. So, right. Don't just ask it to write a blog, because it will, you ask an SEO person, like, oh, just write me a blog post. The SEO person, a good one at least, will say, hey, back up. Like, what's the strategy? What are we doing here? What are the goals, right? And ChatGPT will just spit it back out to you, right? It's like, no, challenge me, I think I want a blog post, but it's not really what I need. It's also good with planning. You could go to and say, hey, give me some blog post topics, and then you could just skim through there. And of course, you could get a little bit more detailed. Okay. ChatGPT is also really good at taking direction and taking style. And this is like one of the things that kind of differentiates, like, if you use ChatGPT without these extra modifiers, that's when it becomes just like a really cookie cutter, right? And a few times I've even had I've had email sent and like, I'm like, you use ChatGPT to write this email, right? And it's like, I know, because this is how ChatGPT sounds, again, without these kind of like extra modifiers, right? So here's some, that I've used before that are, that are good. You could talk about styles. You could give specific authors. You give specific audience. Audience is one you should always give. Hey, here is my audience. Here's my target audience. Here's what my business is about. Not write me a blog post. Period. If it has all that, it will obviously work much better. It also does good, like I say, with you can even reference brands. So one thing that we played with that I think actually gave really good content was write like Apple. Right. And it would actually write like really good, concise, like ad copy, not too wordy. Right. So even when it comes to at least big brands, right, you could even give it a brand and say, write like this. Also, you could give it, if you really like your current content, you could give it all your current content. You could say, hey, I'm going to send you all this, hey, and please read this. And I'm going to ask you to write in the same style. So So you could literally give it like your 10 best blog posts, right? That you personally like, that maybe the CEO wrote, or maybe you look at your analytics and you're like, hey, these are the best, and this really resonates with people and has the most viewership. And you could say, hey, I want you to reference the style of writing through these. And then again, when you ask it now to write something new, and it's going to reference what you gave it before, it's going to come out different. And again, come back with like, why is Google not super against it? Well, you'll never know if I use ChatGPT, if I gave it so many things and told it to write like me, you won't know that like, hey, was it actually writing? Was it me? How much did I edit it? Okay. This also works really well. And this is more or less what we use right now internally. We use it first to write the initial draft. And again, that's like once you already know the topic, the title, all that, right? And the audience, right? So you give it as much context as you can. Here's my writing style, here's my business plan, right? Here's absolutely everything, right? And now write me this, and you use it as initial draft, right? The more examples you provide, the better. You give it feedback, right? And then you rewrite it as a human. You actually read it, because a lot of times you read it and you're like, this still doesn't make sense. Maybe in a year, bit different, but at least right now, definitely need to fact check. Can't stress it enough. Anything that is a fact, you should be like, okay, let me actually make sure it didn't totally, make that up, right? And then you could actually re-input it back to ChatGPT, right, after you edit it, right? Because at least me, I'm not the best at grammar and stuff like that. So I'd give it back to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you now just like read it through for grammar and for consistency and for flow? And then maybe it'll tweak a little bit more. And that gives you the best output. And again, the more you kind of like go back and forth, the more you revise it. You can even use some other AI tools too, like Bard, and give it to Bard. Say, hey, can you edit this a little bit, make it a little bit to this audience, make it a little bit more concise, and have these AIs really like play together. Okay. With image generation specifically, and this is the old DALL-E. I'll show that it's now a new version with it. At least people who pay for the ChatGPT Pro. First I used it, and I was like, hey, one of the services we do is social media, right? And we spend a lot of times making social media graphics. So I went to this AI tool and I said, hey, this is DALL-E. It's from OpenAI. It's now integrated with ChatGPT. And I said, hey, can you make me a social media post for Valentine's Day? And it came back with this. It's like, these aren't even words, right? They're random letters, right? So, and I tried like a few iterations. I'm like, use these exact, and it's still like, I'm like, how could you be so smart and not like, make a simple instruction like, I just want this text on the graphic. It didn't come out so good, right? And I was almost like ready to like give up on like, hey, image generation AI is not ready for me to actually use. But I was wrong. And, if you give it creative direction, right? So all of a sudden here I said, hey, can you make me an image, make a light bulb with a heart-shaped brain inside, right? And that's kind of like a play at our logo. It actually did pretty good, right? And especially it's like I look at this and I'm like, I got in a couple of minutes, right? If I actually had to tell my designer to do this, right, it would take the designer like an hour, right? Because like I want a custom, right? This isn't just about like finding a thumbnail on a thumbnail site and just making bold or something. No, like this is custom, custom work you have to draw. It's now much better, and Midjourney is good too, but I kind of like just sticking with OpenAI. Now, here's a fun one. I literally did this with my kids yesterday. So here's two of my kids, right? And I just took the picture, just from my phone, and I told ChatGPT to make them into dolls, right? And then it made them into dolls, right? And I think it really does even more than like starting from zero, which also does really well. It's really good at editing like that, right? You give it something, and I mean, there's some phenomenal examples online too. Like you sketch your logo, right? You're like, this is kind of like my logo. And you literally take a picture of it, you give it to ChatGPT and say, hey, make a logo from this, digitize and make it better. And it does amazing work. I said, hey, here's a SmartSites logo. Can you make it more modern, make it different? It came out like crap. I was like, okay, but again, if you have like a general concept and you sketch it out and you give it to it, it does really well. No, the stuff it does is pretty crazy. And we tried dolls and we tried action figures and superheroes and make them older, make them into dinosaurs and Pokemon, and then write a story about it. And it literally, does it all. And then I print it out. My kids have this like story about them being a superhero. So it's so powerful. And again, it's, this is a fun application of it. But when you think about SEO and you think about content, and even like, when you think about images right now, most times, right, let's say you have a blog or something, you're taking stock photos, right? So you're taking a photo that many other people have, and maybe you're editing a little bit, or at least we do, right? And if there's anyone in a shirt, we make it yellow to make like SmartSites yellow, right? We edit a little bit, we add some font to it, but in the end of the day, it's kind of like, all right, this thing exists. You're going to see it in other places. Even more than that, sometimes very annoyingly, or at least I do, get these emails of like, hey, like you stole this photo, you don't have the license to it. And it's like, oh, we do, but now I have to go back to stock photography site, and we've used a bunch over the years, find the license, like email back to the people. And I'm like, this isn't fair. This is like a mass automated email. You just clicked, and it just gave me like 45 minutes of work of like finding the license number, right? This is unique, right? This is absolutely brand new. No one has this. In fact, I mean, in a bad way, if you ever want to recreate it, you can't, right? If I go back, I'm like, I want this image again, it would just send me something totally different. They'll be like, here are my kids again, make them into dolls again, just like you did before. It'll be totally different. So, yeah. So even with copyright, and also OpenAI had this like Dev Day, big conference a couple of days ago. I don't know too much about it, but about this new feature that came out, but I think it's called like CopyGuard or something, but they were really big on like, listen, if you actually get like a lawsuit for the content that you created through ChatGPT, we will be your lawyers, right? So they're taking it really seriously. I think they're thinking ahead of like, hey, soon people are going to get sued because Barbie will sue me and say, hey, though, that's actually like a Barbie type of doll, right? And then all of a sudden I need to get like a lawyer to prove like, no, like, listen, this isn't like really like Barbie. We aren't too inspired by Barbie, like maybe just a little bit. But again, OpenAI is really taking that by the horns, reading that and saying, hey, we'll actually help you with those cases. And again, it's very new, so we'll see how it plays out. But I think that's really smart because now instead of having like thousands and tens of thousands of different lawyers trying to like fight these cases in many different ways, they're centralizing it. I'm sure using AI to help a lot too, right? And getting the laws of your jurisdiction, how to defend it and stuff. And they're saying, hey, listen, use this and you could, sleep well, because if anything, if this comes about, we have your back. So that's really cool. Okay. Yes, please. Yes.
If you wanted to recreate that same image or something very similar, ask it for the seed ID, SEED.
And you can.
Yeah, ask it for the seed ID, and it'll tell you this big old number. And say, using this seed ID, create the kids with.
You could come back to it or something. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Very good. Didn't know that. Good tip. Thank you. One thing not to use ChatGPT for is reviews, right? And again, it's like, and I say that because there's this like Reddit post about SmartSites. Someone goes like, hey, does anyone have experience about SmartSites? And someone on our team found them. They say, hey, like, look, they're talking about us in Reddit and we just stumbled upon it, right? And they also said, hey, this person actually wrote like a good review about it. Someone actually replied and they're like, hey, like whose client is this? We don't know this person. And I read it. I'm like, they use ChatGPT for it, right? And lo and behold, I went to ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, can you write a review for SmartSites? It sounded like pretty much exactly the same. I'm like, I saw that from a mile away. So, really, I think it'll be obvious, if you use ChatGPT to write your own reviews or your own product reviews, but it's really good at replying to reviews, and that's totally fine. That's totally kosher, right? So all of a sudden, again, on Google reviews or something, you have this like nasty review, right? Oh, the waiting times were long, or this and that happened, right? Before we used to reply to this ourselves, right? Or we don't offer review management as a service, but with our clients, we end up being kind of like their consultants. We work with them, just really close. And when they have something like a bad review that actually hurts their reputation, hurts their SEO, at least indirectly, right? They come to us and they're like, hey, can you help us with it? And here we are trying to like reply to these reviews the best that we can, because some of our clients have absolutely no business in replying to reviews. They just get nasty. It's like, absolutely do not post this. But ChatGPT is really, really good about it. You could literally just copy and paste, hey, here's the review I got. Maybe you could give it some context if you have it. Can you suggest a reply? It's really, really good with it. Okay. All right. Generative AI for SEO analysis and links. Okay. One of the biggest, most powerful things with ChatGPT is that it's not just text-based, right? And most people use it with just text-based prompts, right? I'm not even talking about images. So again, if you have ChatGPT 4, definitely worth the $20 per month. You could give it data. You could give it spreadsheets. You could give it Excel files, right? You could say, hey, I don't know, export something from analytics and give it to, hey, hey, can you analyze this, right? Can you analyze my top blog posts and suggest blog posts that are similar to blog posts I've already written, and literally, just export from Google Analytics, import to ChatGPT, and have it analyze it. Recently, I had a client do an export from its CRM of just like all its, it was a medical spa, and it's like every time it makes a sale, or it's like a point of sale system, it's a row in this document, right? But it has like dates, and it has like what they sold and who sold it to them, who serviced them, how long. And I would have I didn't even have like a scope here. Or it wasn't like, hey, Mike, can you analyze this for something? I was just like, let's just see what ChatGPT comes up with this. And I gave it to ChatGPT, and it was brilliant. It said the best days, it said their best employees. And I was like, and he's looking at this, he's like, I didn't know this employee was so good. And I'm like, this employee should be trained by that employee, according to this, right? So it's really, really good with getting data with CSV files, with Excel files. What's the one I used here? Oh, this is a good one, actually. So we have a lot of reviews, right? We have hundreds and hundreds, but we want to showcase the best reviews on our website, right? And before ChatGPT, I would give it to like a project manager that was like sort of idle, and I was like, hey, can you go through this and pick out the best ones for the website? And it's really hard though, right? Like imagine you have like hundreds and hundreds of reviews, and it's like, right, my criteria is like, okay, like I want there to be like, I want to be like really good reviews. I want to be specific. I want to mention results. I want it to be very varied. Don't just have 10 that say we're really nice, because that's like, okay, that's not the only thing, people look for. I want it to vary demographically. I want guys and girls, right? I want different industries, right? And give like a lot of criteria. It's like, all right, for someone to keep that in their head and then come back with like, okay, here's the best snippets of, after analyzing all this, it's very hard. You could say impossible to take, I don't know, it's like a task that would take weeks, right? ChatGPT, absolutely brilliant. So I put it in a spreadsheet, and it says running sentiment analysis. No, literally, it says like running sentiment analysis. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you should have done. Like like that's a thing. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And it comes back with, and it was brilliant. Really, okay, it still need like a human review afterwards. I'm like, right, maybe I have a 20 provider, like, hey, these 5 actually aren't that good, right? But it's really, really good with data, right? So again, when you have specific things like that, definitely use ChatGPT, again, whether it's on-site SEO or an SEO analysis, or you're adding something to a website, you have analytics, really, I think it really shines with this. All right. Okay, so ChatGPT, not so great at crawling sites. I say not so great as in now it does, and that's very recent again. So before you couldn't browse the web. So you can actually go like, hey, go to this website and do this. Now it can, but it can do like 100, right? It can give like, hey, here's 100 URLs and come back to me with like all the meta description or the titles, or there's a lot of SEO tools that do that. But say you have something custom, you're like, I just want like the third H3 tag or something, right? And ChatGPT can't, but it's really, really good at coding actually. And this is one of the things, like other use cases of ChatGPT, there's like some compromises. Like, okay, I'm going to ask you to write content, but it's not really like our content, and I gotta make sure like other people didn't say it also, and maybe do a plagiarism check and check facts and stuff. When it comes to coding, it's just like, did it do the job, right? And very often it does the job. I'm a big fan of the Google, just like Google Suite, right? Google Workplace. So that's what I use as kind of like my medium. But Microsoft has these products. So many have these products. But anyway, so literally I would just go to it and I say, hey, can you write me a Google app script that does, A, B, and C, whatever I want it to do, and then go to Google App Script, and then I just paste it in and press play, and it does it. And sometimes I have to go back and forth, and Google App Scripts also has like its own like toggles, like, hey, like after 500 URLs or something, it says like, hey, exceeded limits. And then I go right back to ChatGPT, and I'm like, hey, here's the error. And it goes, okay, no problem. We're just going to toggle it. We're going to make sure, it accesses 1,000 URLs every half an hour and just run it for 10 hours. It's like, okay, perfect. So yeah, really good for stuff that it can't do, especially when it comes to like heavy crawling and analysis. You could just have it write the code, and then whether it's your server or Google App Script or some Microsoft alternative, have someone else kind of be that medium. It also, at least right now, can't do complex development stuff, right? You have to like really come to it with a specific problem, right? If you could come to it with a website and say, hey, here's the website, make it faster, it'll just spit out some generic stuff. Hey, it's too complex, but here's some things that we suggest that you check, blah, 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 right? If you give it like a piece of code and you're like, hey, this piece of code, this iterates too much. Can you make this slider iterate less? It's loading all the images when you go to a website, and we just want to load one image every time, that image is turned, then it could actually help you with that code, right? But it has to be specific. It's not really good at having kind of like these big tasks. So you do still need a developer for sure. Okay. It's also not so great at link building. You could come to it and say, hey, here's my website. Can you give me some popular places to build a link? And I mean, it gives you something, but nothing, matching what other tools would give you, right? So, doesn't do great at that. Other people I've heard use it for like, hey, we use ChatGPT for, use it for personalized emails, right? So you're doing this like link outreach and you have this table of like, hey, we have this resource that we think, be really cool for schools, and we want all these schools to feature this resource or whatever. And we're going to email them and ask them to do it, right? Or one that I had, for example, is we work with a Boolean e-commerce site. They sell Boolean, and we made them just like a little graph widget to see the current price of gold and silver. And we made it better than others out there, and we made it a way that other people could embed in their website. And everyone at that time embedded from this other website called Kitco, and they had these like really ugly graphs. And we say, hey, we're gonna go out, we're gonna just contact people who have these ugly graphs, right? And say, hey, we created a better gold graph, so why don't you put it on your website? We have these better features, and as a bigger, you could look at like 5 years and 10 years. With Kitco, you can't, etc. Right? And we send an email, right? And again, some people say, hey, the ChatGPT could help you actually write these emails. So every email is a little different, and ChatGPT could do that. But to be honest, I don't take the value out in that, because they are like, man, I could just write a really good email template, right? Like email's not like content. Like people aren't comparing. Like, hey, did you get the same email as me? Like, there's 5 of these emails. Like it must be right. Like no one's doing that comparison. The email's just going to you, right? So you're better off, I think 9 times out of 10, just writing a good email, even if it's the same one. You don't have to switch it, right? Google's not looking, right? And just, send that out versus having ChatGPT like force it to customize a little bit. But yeah, maybe there's some use cases where it's different, but for the most part. And also just to mention, SEMrush, Ahrefs, those are really powerful tools. So when it comes to like analysis, when it comes to a lot of the tools that they have, SEMrush and Ahrefs, ChatGPT is no replacement. Because I've heard people say, like, oh, I'll just use ChatGPT. Like, I'll need this. No, absolutely not. Like, ChatGPT that does not have all the tools, all the analysis, all the data. At least not yet, by the way. I have in a future slide, but they came out with these GPTs now where, ChatGPT is like its core product, but you could go in and you could actually, feed it data and have your own little ChatGPT. So I'm waiting for, and I hope this will happen, that SEMrush or Ahrefs actually makes their own Ahrefs GPT with access with all the data that they have, right? Or with access of all the APIs. Because they have an APIs. You get enterprise Ahrefs, same with SEMrush, you have the API key. So you have that data, you can use it with other sources. So, presumably, hopefully, they're going to actually team up with and create their own Ahrefs GPT with actually Ahrefs data. So you could actually go in and say, hey, who are my top 10 competitors? Without having to go to the Ahrefs interface and be like, all right, where is it again? Or what pages should I write? Or what pages should I optimize for? And have the Ahrefs data with just this chat, natural language interface. So, I'll be shocked if it doesn't happen. Okay, cool. ChatGPT is not the only game in town. What are some other AI tools? So it's funny. This stuff changes so quickly that I would have had to tweak it as of a few weeks ago. So ChatGPT 3.5, the non-paid version does not access the internet. Okay, the paid version now does access the internet, by the way. So the paid version, and I tried it a couple of days ago. I was like, hey, what was the how did the New Jersey Devils do in their last game? I think it was my question, right? And again, ChatGPT 4 knew, Bard knew, right? ChatGPT 3.5 didn't. It spit out, hey, sorry, I only have data up to this. So they could browse the web now. It's not necessarily, it's a little different than their training data is still a little static. So it's almost like 2 separate things. Like you could browse data, but it's not necessarily trained in that data. But anyway, so if you don't pay for ChatGPT, it doesn't browse the web. You can't get current facts. You can't do recency. Bard does. Bard is free by Google, and ChatGPT 4 does as well. Go ahead.
So if you use Bing and then you get prompted to download the app, you get access to ChatGPT 4
Nice.
for free. But I think it's not plus, but it's still better than free.
Nice. Good hack. Thank you. Also, I call it uncensored AI. So ChatGPT has certain policies that will literally come to you and say, hey, we can't, it's against our policy, right? And it could be, I don't know, it's like, I have a friend and he writes Amazon books in the adult erotica space, right? And he was like all upset. He's like, Mike, I can't use ChatGPT for this because literally you go to it with his content, right? And even to edit it and they say, sorry, like this is against, our policies. So there are some alternatives. One like Llama, it's like open source and you can actually host it locally. Twitter also came out with one releasing called Grok. I haven't played around with it, but I'm assuming if there are some topics it doesn't touch, it's probably much less than ChatGPT. So so there are policies that ChatGPT has, but if you face it, there are alternatives. And if you have to run it something locally, it won't be as good. But by the way, there you also get to keep all your privacy because that's another concern. Anything you give ChatGPT, it kind of like houses it. So it's like, okay, anything you give it now, it's training data. So it's like, okay, that's a little risky, but not as good. But there are things you can run locally as well. Okay, cool. This is very, very new, and it's absolutely crazy. And they announced it like a week ago, where you use ChatGPT and you create your own GPT. Right. So for example, I went to it and I, said, hey, I'm going to create this GPT and it's going to be this like SEO master specialist. Right. And then you feed it data. Right. So again, ideally you feed it, like you connect it with an API, right? Google API or Ahrefs API or SEMrush API. But I just fed it lots of like Google best practices, like PDF some stuff, right? So I went like read this, and I found this like Google PDF that they had about like SEO 101. So I'm like, here, read this and read that, and read all these things, and you are going to be this SEO consultant, and that's what I told it. And I also said stuff like, hey, we want specific recommendations, like not theories. We want actual, you are the consultant, right? And then I went to it and I said, hey, I don't know if you see the whole prompt, but I went to it and I said, hey, here's my website, Dr. Alex at NYC. We're trying to rank for cosmetic dentist NYC. Can you give some suggestions on how I could rank for this keyword? And it did. And I think it's blurry for you guys, but literally it says, hey, your homepage title right now is Dr. Alex NYC Cosmetic Dentist. And it suggested to flip that. If you call it NYC Cosmetic Dentist, Dr. Alex, putting the keyword in the front, it actually will help you rank better for that keyword. And it was, again, this isn't like, you're taking this information and you're giving the suggestion. It gave that suggestion, right? It browsed the website, it found the title, right? It took all the information about what Google likes and came back and said, hey, your title should have the keyword in the front, and it gave that exact suggestion. But ultimately, again, it's one of those things, it's just a tool and you kind of still need that human element. Because I look at this and say, okay, if I, when with their option, we actually, it dropped a couple of keywords that right now we're ranking for, right? So again, the human would know like, okay, well, this is the only keyword you're ranking for. That's a good suggestion, but you actually lost a couple of things in that suggestion. So ultimately, we're not going to go, forward. But again, just really, really powerful. And this is just me feeding it Google's own documentation, and you give it and say, okay, I read it, I got it. And if you actually add APIs to it with actual data, and again, I'll be surprised if it doesn't come out soon. Okay. Artificial intelligence today is like the internet boom in 1995. As in, right, it hasn't like burst yet. And I'm not talking about ChatGPT itself, but there's so many AI products out there right now. And there's even like ones we've used, which, and most of them I didn't like, to be honest. We try to use like a video one where you put in long form content. And it takes like the best like 20-second snippet. It wasn't that great, right? We ended up just not using it. I was like, that's pretty good, but not good enough to actually use. We use some others. So there's a lot out there. Definitely play around with it, but I think ultimately a lot of them are going to stop, right? This is just a little bit like anyone that does anything with AI, it's like, oh my God, like, hey, implement this AI solution. Like, hey, here's my software. Well, you should use the AI version of that software. Should I though? Like, how much will actually help me? So yeah, there's a lot out there. I think most will not stick, but some will end up being kind of the huge companies of tomorrow. Kind of the big question, should you implement or resist artificial intelligence? And a lot of people, I was speaking at Google a couple of last week, I guess, and actually one of the questions they asked, like, how do you feel about AI? Like, what are your feelings? And it was kind of like a mix of like excited, overwhelmed, confused, and scared, right? And one of the things that's scared is like, will my job even exist because of it? But I think, ultimately the way I see it is it's a tool. So it's more so like, here my metaphor is just like a farmer, right? When tractors came out, right? Did a tractor replace the farmer? No, but it definitely replaced farmers that didn't use the tractor, right? All of a sudden you still have like your ox and you're like, okay, like how much are you actually seeding here, right? You're not too much. With a tractor, you could do so much more and get so much more product and so much better QA, right? So all of a sudden, farmers didn't go extinct, of course not, but the ones that didn't actually use this heavy machinery, did, because they weren't competitive anymore. Is ChatGPT AI going to replace lawyers? No, but it's probably going to replace lawyers that don't use it. Imagine these like legal cases. Some of them, have like these like, I don't know, like thousands of pages of thousands of pages of material that lawyers have to go through. You better hope that they use AI, right? Because if you're paying, $400 an hour for them to, read through like stacks and stacks of emails, right? All of a sudden it's a huge bill, right? But you feed that through AI, right? It's going to interpret that really, really well. So in all disciplines, in all cases, be it SEO, be it marketing, be it something else, AI, I think, is really powerful. And again, it's going to be it gives the power to the person. Very similar to, instead of going to a library, you use Google now, right? ChatGPT is one of these like really, really, an AI, these really powerful tools that I think is going to just tremendously help everyone be more productive and produce more things. That's all I have for you. I'll take questions. Thank you. Yes, question.
When you were talking about the image generation, what is the current policy or legal status of using images for mass communications and for the public in general, like advertising?
You could use it, yeah. If you create something, and no matter how you use it, you get full rights to it. So you could put it in a book, So whatever you use from Dolly or Midjourney, you have the copyright rights to it. And again, I mean, how many of these cases actually came to court yet? And there's actually a legal precedent to it? No. So a lot of this is kind of like theory. So some lawyer was probably be like, hey, be careful, right? Again, ChatGPT is taking a stance of like, listen, if this goes to court, we'll actually help you defend it, right? So at least that gives you some peace of mind. But and also I should say, sometimes some prompts for legal reasons it doesn't do. So like, you saw my kids like turn into these Barbie these dolls. When I first prompted turn them into Barbie dolls, it said no. Like, hey, sorry, that's like a proprietary thing. I will not. And then I'll try like Barbie inspired doll, and I forget if I had to like get rid of Barbie at all then. So yeah, they have some protection there to make sure that they're not violating any rights. But yeah, if you read their policies, and same with Midjourney and other places, that they say, listen, there's no, this is yours. Yeah.
I was just asking, for some reason, I thought that Midjourney said something like not for commercial purposes.
Not sure.
I thought it could say that.
Yeah. Not sure. Thank you. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, please.
What happens to the data that you load up into the large language database? Does it become possession of everybody, or is there a way to retain your ownership of that, like the picture of your children?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the big scare. And there's even cases where I think it was like Samsung, like developers actually use ChatGPT to help them write code, and then some other prompted something and actually gave, like in that answer, gave like proprietary Samsung code that they gave in their own prompt to ChatGPT. It's like, wait a second, that wasn't.
So one company I work with, they definitely want that off because they don't want it to have that issue.
Yeah, exactly.
There's issues with a doctor that shares
Yep.
patient information with ChatGPT.
Yeah. And similar, when you're creating GPTs also, the new thing they have, same thing, you can make it private. But by default, it's not though. So yeah. Good question. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I read something a while back about websites blocking the crawler, so the ChatGPT
Yes.
couldn't crawl a lot of their sites.
That's right.
What else do you know about that? Is that gonna cause a problem? We're gonna start doing that. What's your take on all that?
No, I've heard it too. I think a few big ones too. I think maybe even Pinterest said like, hey, don't access, because right, it's not almost not like, what do I get as Pinterest? Like, you're going to take my stuff. No one's actually going to go to Pinterest.com. So please stop taking my stuff. Go directly to my website. Yeah, I think that will happen. That might happen more and more. And maybe at some point, if it happens too much, ChatGPT will have to like change it itself and say, hey, listen, let me maybe incentivize you and let us use it or something. But we haven't crossed it yet. But you're 100% right. Any other questions, comments? Cool. That's all. Thanks, guys.
We do have a small gift for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Not sure what it is, but it's got your name on it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
No
it.
problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That
I have
really
some
helped.
overlapping content from my presentation. It's funny.
Yeah.
I have the video of Gary Vaynerchuk talking about the